Okay, we're going to get going. So this is the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council first presentation on how to do community first responder maps. Going to do a super quick intro before I hand it off to Katie, who actually knows the material. I am Scott Craddy, Executive Director of the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council. Our purpose is to inform, empower, and mobilize county residents to survive and thrive in our wildfire-prone environment. We do a tremendous lot of things for an incredibly small organization. We run a number of large fuel reduction projects. One of our big missions is to make sure more of them happen. So we do a lot of work to try to land grants to bring money for wildfire preparation work into the county. We have a network of about 45, I think at this point, neighborhood fire safe councils that we try to support that are out doing work in communities. We provide fuel and equipment. We have a couple of chippers and a chip truck now and a equipment trailer to help people with their own projects. We do a lot of educational work. If you haven't looked at it yet, firesafemendocino.org, our website, is a treasure trove of information, including a really great video series on how to harden your home and a lot of other things. And we do planning and policy work, and that's just kind of a super high level summary. How did we get to this particular project? One of our grant projects at the moment is a community wildfire protection plan for the community of Hopland. It was grant funded, and early on in that process, we had a chat with Fire Chief Franklin of Hopland Fire Station to find out what he thought was important. And at the top of his list were first responder emergency access maps. And as we delved into that a little bit, we found out that 2 other communities in Mendocino have done this project. It actually started in Anderson Valley with Chief Avila. And both he and Chief Franklin had been assigned to fires in Southern California. And when they pulled into the community, they found a Knox box that had community maps that they found were incredibly valuable, because often first responders are coming in from wherever in an emergency. People are coming from all over the place. They're not familiar with the territory. They arrive at a neighborhood, at a road going off the highway, and they don't really know what's there other than sort of basic street maps that are available. So these first responder maps are a way to provide at the gateway of your community for first responders a view that lets them see quickly where the building footprints are, where the density is, what the layout is down that road, where there are water sources down that road, depending on what you want to include, where there are homes that might need particular help with evacuation, where there are turnarounds so they know they can go safely down that road and have a place to turn around. So this is an opportunity to provide sort of the full slate of information that a first responder might need to be able to do the most effective job possible in providing service to your neighborhood. And since we wanted to do these maps for Hopland, we decided to make a project of it, and we applied to the Community Foundation, which provided funding for this project. And this project is basically since we're creating these maps for Hopland, we are documenting it thoroughly. So we decided to thoroughly document the process from A to Z. It is up on our website. So that if other communities want to replicate this process, they don't start from scratch. There's a guide, a map basically of how to do this. So if you look under Prepare Your Neighborhood on our website, you'll see all this is documented. And before I hand this off to Katie, I just want to say that this is a tremendous amount of information. We're not going to teach you how to do mapping in 1 hour. And I would advise that you probably don't even want to try to take notes. Just focus on paying attention, because our website has the step-by-step write-up of this stuff. This is just to give you an overview of what's possible. And you will also have this recording that will be on our website to come back to if you need to in the future to if you need to be able to visualize the directions later on. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie to do first an overview, and then she's going to give you a sort of a step through the ArcGIS process of doing the basic map, and then the process of turning that map over to neighborhood volunteers to validate and complete the rest of the information that's not available generically. All right, and Katie, take it away.
All right, good morning, guys. My name is Katie Smith. I am the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council's AmeriCorps member for this year through a program called Grizzly Corps, and I've been working on this project for a couple of months now. And so I'm going to go through, just to kind of repeat Scott, we're going to go through a really quick high-level overview of what the process of making these maps are like, and then we'll go into two kind of screen demonstrations of creating the base map from publicly available data and then gathering information using a software called Avenza Maps. So like Scott said, it is going to go really fast, and I apologize. Please feel free to put questions in the chat as I go. But yeah, it's going to be pretty high level and pretty quick. And just a disclaimer, I'm no GIS professional, so I'm going to do my very best to answer all your questions, but most of my knowledge is pretty applied. So I apologize in advance if I cannot, but I will do my best. So I'm going to start a screen share here. Hopefully you guys can see that. All right, so yep, just to reiterate, Scott, really the purpose of these maps is to communicate local knowledge to emergency response professionals coming from all over the country. So each of these, or state or wherever they're coming from, so each map for each of your communities is going to look really different. And the goal is really to efficiently and effectively communicate the knowledge from your community to people coming to provide assistance. So the first step of that process is assembling a mapping team. Like we started talking about before, there's a lot of mapping software. ArcGIS Pro is my preferred, mostly because it's the one I have the most experience in, but there's a lot of different GIS softwares and other mapping softwares out there that you can use. We really recommend, because they are complicated to learn and often expensive. If you don't already have someone who is familiar with GIS, sometimes it can be valuable to even just contract with someone who is. Because these maps are pretty quick to make once you get going, once you're experienced with using GIS and making maps, they can be pretty quick. So to talk about what data is included in these base maps, there are 5 key layers that we like to include in the first draft of the base map. And those are roads, parcels, address points, streams and water bodies, and building footprints. So the first 3 layers that you see there are MCFSC actually purchased from the county and has permission to share with anyone trying to make these maps. So those are publicly available from us at the Fire Safe Council. And then the last 2, streams and water bodies and building footprints, are downloaded from the internet. So again, publicly available data you can access for free using ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Online, excuse me. And you don't need any type of license or account in order to access those. You can just find it on the internet. So these are kind of the data that is included in creating the base map. So the next step, and what part of a bulk of our conversation today, will be visualizing this data, how to take those layers and put it on a map in a way that's useful for folks who are coming into your communities to try and provide assistance. So I'm going to skip through this. This is the bulk of what we'll be talking about later on. So the next big step is enlisting volunteers, and this is really where the value gets added to these maps. So depending on your the number of volunteers you're able to track down, their amount of time and effort they're able to put towards this process, there is a wealth of different information that you can gather. This list right here is kind of listed in the priority order, and there's a document that goes into much more detail about each of these pieces of data on our website that Scott mentioned earlier. So that's really valuable piece of information when you're starting to train volunteers. But just to quickly go through it, first and foremost, roads are so essential, not only to verify that the roads that exist on the map actually exist in real life, but vice versa, if there are roads that don't occur on the map but are accessible, those are important to add. In addition, roads that are only accessible some time of year are important to mark. Roads that are blocked by a locked gate, something like that. All those pieces, you can drop a point on the map and add that detail in order for it to be reflected for people coming into your community. Moving on from that, addresses and residence locations. The addresses, like we just heard before this, it is really important to have your reflective sign out there, and to be sure that that address matches what's on the map so people can find you, and can see where your driveway is, that type of thing. Residence locations, we use a Microsoft layer of building footprints. That's pretty good, but we do know that there are some faults to it. Sometimes it doesn't catch the footprint of a house. So if you know that your house is there and you don't see it on the map, really important to drop a pin and let them know that there is a residence there. Similarly, water sources, this can be pools, ponds, water catchment features, all that type of thing that a firefighter might be able to pump from in an emergency. And then as much information as you can tell about that is important. So the capacity, the flow rate, the different size attachment, if that's applicable, that type of thing is important to include in that data. Hydrants and standpipes, same thing, mark a pin on the map where those occur in your community. Key infrastructure can be very unique to your community. This can be things like cell towers, a school, and then it can get as niche as, like we were saying, maybe an elderly couple who doesn't drive or don't have access to a car that might need help evacuating. That's the type of fine grained detail that you can put on these maps if you're so inclined. Storage of toxic substances, pretty self-explanatory. And then bridges on private roads. This is kind of a last thought. When I took a firefighter training, they talked to me about never crossing bridges on private roads that you don't know weight capacity to. So if that's the case for your house, if you have a bridge, it could be important to mark that weight capacity if you want someone to come defend your house. So those are just some examples of the type of data that your volunteers might be gathering during this process. Now we talk about how it's gathered. There's kind of two primary methods. One is the kitchen table map. You can print out a big copy, get out your colored pens and start marking things up. And that's a great option. It works well. But whoever is part of your mapping team is going to have to go back in and digitize all that information. So we are really recommending that if possible, you try and train your volunteers up with a mapping software. We're going to do a demonstration of Avenza maps later on. And the reason that I use that is both because I like it personally and I'm pretty familiar with it, and also because there's a free version that it's completely free. You can download personal maps and you can use them offline. So in communities where you have no cell service, it's no big deal. You don't need any of that. So we're going to do a demo of that later on. And like I said, doing those digital versions, that's really what we are suggesting, because it is so easy to incorporate that information back into the base map. And then finally, the last step is publishing the maps. We kind of encourage folks to publish in 3 different places. One, to your local fire department. Like we just heard, they have kind of a book of maps. Second, as Scott said, a knockbox or similar lockbox in an easily accessible location that first responders will have that master key and be able to quickly pick up a map and orient themselves. And then finally, we kind of suggest that you use a QR code similar to this one down here, so that when responders come upon those maps, they could scan the code and then have a copy on their smartphone that is geo-referenced. So as they drive around, their GPS location can be referenced to the map, which just makes it quick and easy to use. So with that, that was kind of my speed through of the high level process, and I'll get started onto a demonstration with ArcGIS Pro. Unless, Scott, are there any pressing questions I should get to?
Nope, I think you're good to go.
Great. So are you guys seeing my map now? Good to go? Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so this is kind of what GIS looks like when you open it up and you live in the United States. Generally, this is the default. And first things first, I like to do a couple of setup things before I get started making any map. First thing that I like to do is set a bookmark. So you're going to want to scroll in on the area that we're focused on. So I'll come scroll over here to Hoplands, and we're going to make our example here along Fleece Creek Road. Oops. So once I have that kind of in view, I'm going to go ahead and set a bookmark. So to do that, I come up to this bookmark button, I press the drop down, and then I can choose add new bookmark. And I'm just going to name that something that I can easily come back to. And the purpose of this is that sometimes when you add data to your map, it'll speed you off along somewhere else and you'll end up in, Montana somewhere. And especially when you don't have a good landmark to scroll back to really quick, you can just come down here to your bookmarks, click the drop down, and then choose that bookmark we just made, and it'll zoom you back over to the correct frame. So that just will save you a bit of time in the long run. The next step that I like to do before I get started making any map is look at the base map. So the base map is this imagery that we're seeing right now. We're looking at topography of this area, but this button up here changes your base map. So if I click the drop down, it'll give me a number of options. Each of these is kind of good for different purposes depending on the goal of the map you're making. And the beautiful thing about these is that they can be changed throughout the time you're making a map, and it doesn't affect the data. So I like to toggle between a few as I make a map, depending on what I'm trying to achieve at the moment. So for right now, I'm going to turn on this imagery hybrid, which will bring up the satellite imagery, as well as a little bit of human infrastructure, like major roads and towns and things. So now that I have those kind of setup things done, I'm going to go ahead and start adding data to my map. So the first thing I need to do is I need to tell GIS where it's going to go look for data in my computer. So to do so, I'm going to click this Insert tab, and then I'm going to say Add Folder. And this brings up kind of the internal look at my computer. And I'm going to navigate over to the file that I saved all that data that we talked about in the beginning. So all those 5 layers, and I have it in this example map data folder. So once I've navigated there, I'm just going to click OK. And sometimes it's a little bit disconcerting because nothing happens. But what actually happened is that GIS now knows where to go look for data when I ask it to add a layer. So we're going to add a layer now. To do that, we go back over to this map tab. We choose Add Data. If I click this drop down, there's a lot of different options for adding data to my map. I generally focus on these first 2, especially for these purposes. We only use the first 2. The first one, add data to the map, that just adds data from a local source on my hard drive. So things that are physically saved on my computer can be added this way. And then add data from path. That's what I use to add data from ArcGIS Online. So those 2 publicly available data sets that I talked about before can be added this way. So I'll just show you here really quick. So if I click Add Data, again, it shows you that inside view. I'm in my example map data folder that we just added. So it knows where to look now. And these are all the different layers that are added to the map. So if I click on one, I can then hit OK and it'll be added. Just for time saving, I already added those layers, and you can see them over here in the contents pane. So this shows everything that is included in the map. But as you can see, we can't right now see any of those, and that's because these checkboxes are turned off. But if I go ahead and turn them on, you can see things start to appear. So I turned on the water bodies layer first because I wanted to point out a few things here. First and foremost, the reason that I put on my satellite layer is because it's really important to check these layers against real life information. So we can see on this satellite layer that there's all these ponds dotted across the landscape, but our water bodies layer doesn't pick those up. So if I was making this map in real time, it would be important to digitize these water bodies. So all that means is I'm going to draw a little around the layer map that water exists there. I'm not going to do that, just
Katie, your connection's gone a little wonky.
Cool teachable moment. Yes.
Sorry, go ahead. You were just breaking in and out for a moment. I think you're back now.
Check.
Oop. Yeah, you're cutting in and out. Try again.
Anything better?
There we go.
Okay. If anyone, oh, I see messages in the chat. I can hear fine. Speaker's fine. Okay, wonderful. It might be Scott's internet then. So another, and you want to go back to it, there'll be another one. Hopefully we'll. When I was putting this together. So this water bodies layer comes from USGS. So USGS produces a lot of GIS information, and they're really high quality data, usually peer reviewed, not just some stranger walking through the woods, you know. But that being said, there are still opportunities for mistakes. So you can see that this layer shows that Felice Creek cuts up and over the mountains here and ends up way north of where Felice Creek actually exists on the satellite data. So as a map maker, I would go in and I would edit this data in order to follow the actual stream channel here before giving this out to a volunteer. And as a volunteer, if you receive this map and notice that this line was completely off from where it should be, and your map maker didn't notice, really important kind of an tidbit about this area that we're looking at. So I'm going to zoom back out to our standard map frame, and then I'll go ahead and turn on the rest of these layers. So you can see as I check boxes, things continue to show up. So the next piece, once you've added all this data to your map, the next piece is to visualize it. So you can see that there are parts of this map that make it really hard to read. The first thing that I always change when I start adding data to a map is I change the names of each layer. So you can see that I've done that in a couple of these, but I've left the roads as it imported. And the reason not only that you change these is not just to make it easy for you to navigate, but when you go and create a layout, which is the final version of a map that someone might be able to pick up and read, it will have a legend or a key, and that legend is automatically created based on the layers that you have over here. So it's important to make them easily legible so someone looking at the key could quickly reference that. So I'm going to go ahead, and the way you change the name is you do a slow double click, like with many other files, and then you can just go ahead and change it. So I'll make it roads. So once I've renamed everything to things that I like, the next thing that you want to do is make sure that the visualization is good. So you can see that we can see the major roads here in this gray-white color. We can see some building footprints, but there's kind of this green layer over everything. And that's because parcels is being visualized as a green color. And I want to change that because I want to see our base map. So what you do is you come over to this little arrow, you click it to drop down, and then you click on the image here. And this is called the symbology. It'll bring up this symbology page on our right-hand side. Fancy word for, you know, the symbol that it uses to display. So I'm going to click on this properties button, and then I can use this to change the color and the outline color. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to no color, and I'm going to set the outline to red because that's the standard that we've been using. And then I'm going to change the outline width just to 1 point because again, that's the standard. So you can see down here, this is a little preview of what the symbology will do, but over here on the map, nothing happens until I press apply down here. So I'm going to do that. And then beautiful, we can see the imagery again, which is great. So next thing you'll notice is that it actually is really hard to see any of these dots. The building footprints have kind of all but disappeared amidst the satellite imagery. So this is what I was saying. This is when it's really beneficial to change your base map. So I'm going to come back over here and come to the base map. And this is where I choose a more plain base map. You know, any of these light colored ones work pretty well. I like the topographic because it's important to see the topography in certain cases. So I'm going to turn that on. And then you can see that things stand out a lot better on this background. And you're able to see the building footprints and all that other information. So the next thing that we'll notice is that these little green dots don't really seem to correlate with much. And what they actually are the address points. But to us, we don't care so much where the address point is in space. That's why we have the building footprints. We want to be able to see the actual number. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the symbology of this little dot in order to make it a little bit less obvious, just so it doesn't stand out as much on the map. So again, I'm just going to change the color. I'm going to make it black. And this time I'm going to change the size over here and just turn it down to 1 point. So it's small on the map and doesn't draw the eye quite so much. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I want to turn on a label. So I'm interested in the house point, the house number associated with each of those little points. So to do that, I right click on the address points and I come down to label and I click that. And then all of a sudden it turns on all our house labels, which is great. So that's the quick rundown of how we're going to visualize these 5 layers on our map. And once you're content with the visualization, what you're going to do is you're going to center the view that you want to include. So for our example, I'm just going to center this area right here of the western part of Felice Creek Road. And then our next step is to create a layout. So to do that, we come up to insert and we say insert new layout. Again, we get a bunch of options. It will be beneficial to produce some of these bigger ones for these maps once they're finalized, but for our purposes today, we're just going to use the standard letter size. And this creates, this creates a blank sheet, and we're going to use this to build a map layout. So to do so, we come over to insert. The first thing I always do is insert a map frame. So choose your drop down. It'll give you a bunch of options. I like to choose this one. And this will give you the frame that you left in the map tab. So whatever we are looking at over there is going to show up here. So I'm going to use that box just to draw a rectangle on my blank sheet of paper. And there you go. You can see the exact view we were just looking at on the other tab. So the next step, there are 5 kind of key elements that you want to add to every map layout, and that's a title, a north arrow, a scale bar, a legend, and then the date. So we're going to go ahead and do all those elements. So starting with the title, that shows up in this graphics and texts frame right here. This box here is going to be a rectangular text box. I'm just going to use that to add a title to our map. I'm going to call this Felice Creek Road, and then I'm going to call it Western. And from there, you can use this format tab up top to edit the format like many other softwares that you might be familiar with, like Microsoft Word or something like that. So I'll just use this to change the size and then to center it so it looks more like a title. Next thing we'll do is add the other elements. So again, we want to click on this insert tab. I'll go ahead and put a date using the rectangular box once again. And so for the purpose of these maps, you might want to include the date the map was created. So I'll put today's date, and then also the date the map was verified. So this is, oops, if I can spell it. So this is going to be the date that once you get feedback from folks in the neighborhood, that they're going to give it the stamp of approval, say, yep, this is everything we want to include. So this will be some future date going forward. So I'll just leave that there for now. The next elements, we're going to include a north bar or a north arrow, excuse me. You can choose this drop down menu to choose any of these options. This is the one I like to use, and then you just draw it in the little rectangle onto your map. Same with the scale bar. Choose whichever you like. This is the one I like to use. Draw your rectangle and it shows up there. And the beautiful thing about the north bar or the scale bar and the north arrow, as well as legend, is it's auto-referenced to your map. So if you change the orientation so that north is no longer facing up, the arrow will change with it. And same with the scale. So there's nothing you have to do to set that, which is really lovely. And then last but not least, we'll use this legend button to create a legend. You click on it, and sometimes it's kind of disconcerting because nothing happens. But if you come down here and once again draw a little rectangle, you can see that our legend shows up there. So once you have this, it does pay to take a little time to make it neat and make it really legible when you're producing these for firefighters and emergency response professionals. And I'm going to jump over to this other layout that I made before. Just that's a little neater. And now I'm going to show you how to export it from GIS into your email or into a PDF file. So what you do is you come and you press this share button. And when I do that, it brings up a bunch of options. I'm going to choose the export layout option. It'll bring out this pane over here. And there's a lot of information here. There are only 3 things you need to look at. And that is the file type. You want to be sure it's in PDF. The name. This shows the pathway of where this document is going to be saved. I can click this browse button to bring up the file. And yes, I do want it saved here. So I'm not going to change that, but I am going to change the name. And I'm going to say Police Creek Road, and I'm going to put today's date. And then I can go ahead and save. And then the last thing you want to check before you export is this PDF settings. And you just want to be sure that this box is checked that says export georeference information. And again, this is what's going to allow someone that looks at this map to have their GPS point follow along. So that's an important one. So then you can go ahead and hit export, and it does its thing down here and will save onto my computer. So I know that that was so fast. And once again, that is the quick rundown of putting these maps together. I'm gonna speed through this next Avenza portion, and then I'll come back and answer any questions to clarify. Yes, this is the subscription version. It's of ArcGIS Pro, not the online version. And that's just what I use. You can use the online version. It's a bit harder to create a layout that's really neat and personalized, but you absolutely can use that if that's what you have access to. And I apologize if I miss things in the chat here. It's a little bit hard to do both, but I'll be sure to come back and read through at the end here.
Just to break in quickly, so Keith had a question about making these the same, and our guidelines on our website do recommend standards for all of these, for all of us to use the same. So there's a set of keys in there for how to code the same things, the same color, etc.
Yes, that's a great point. So with that, I'm going to bring up my phone screen next. So I apologize, I'm going to be looking down because I'm going to now show you all how to use Avenza maps. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share here shortly. Beautiful. Okay, so now we should all be looking at my phone screen, and I'm going to take us over to Avenza. This is what the app looks like. There are detailed instructions of how to download this app and how to import an app from your email, or a map from your email into this My Maps frame. But this is what it looks like when you open up the app. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this example map, and this is the same example that I just exported. I just have already imported in here, and I'm going to show you a couple ways to add points and lines to this map. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to add points. So you'll see as I scroll this map around, you can see that there's crosshairs in the middle with a little dot in the very center that doesn't move. And so that is kind of your location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to scroll over to one of these houses and show you how to drop a point. So this can be used if you know that a house, or like your house, for example, if you know that you have a pool or a water storage tank right next to your house, you can use this to place that point. So for example, we're going to use 33091, and let's just say that we know that they have a water tank right in front of their house. So we're going to scroll in pretty close, and wherever we think that water tank is, we're going to center the crosshairs on it. And then we're going to use this pin in the bottom left-hand corner, this button that looks like a little pin. And I'm going to tap on that, and it's going to bring up this add place mark feature. So there are three things that you're going to want to do here. First things first, you're going to want to change the title. So I'll say water tank. And then the next thing in this information pane, if I click on these three dots, it'll show all the different options that I have to set a place mark. For a water tank, we're always going to use the blue pin. So I'm going to choose that one. And then the final thing is to scroll down, and you can see this description is not yet set. So I'll click on that, takes me over to this page, and I can hit edit in the top corner. And then I can type, and I can say this is a 30,000 gallon tank, let's just say. And I know it has a 2-inch attachment. And this is where you can put as much information as you can. The more the merrier. If you have the information, it's better to share it than not. But if you don't have the information, no worries. It's great to show the capacity at the very least. And then I'll just go ahead and hit done. I'll hit back, and then I'll say submit. And there you go. You can see we've saved a point on the map. So The next option that you might use is to physically walk or drive around your neighborhood and mark these places. So if you're driving around and you see there's a fire hydrant or a standpipe on the road, you can place yourself next to the standpipe. And what you're going to do is you're going to hit this little arrow, this empty arrow in the bottom left-hand corner. And you'll see at the bottom, it says locating, and then it says not on map. And this is because I'm sitting in Ukiah. I'm not in Felice Creek, but if you were along this road, it would zero in on your location and you would be centered in these crosshairs. So if we imagine we're standing right here next to the road and we've just hit this button, it's located us right there. We can follow the exact same instructions, tap this little pin, bring up a place mark, and I'm going to say standpipe, if I can spell it. And then I'm going to hit blue again because it's a water source. And for a description, I can hit edit and include whatever information that I would like to about this standpipe. When you're done, you hit done, you go back, you hit submit, and there you go. You have a second point on your map. And yes, this app is Avenza. And there are free version. There's a free and a pro version of it. I always use the free version. It's pretty much it has all the same capacity. You can store fewer maps, but you can always delete maps and add new ones. So I personally use this for just personal life, and I've never had an issue with anything. I always use the free version. So the next thing I'll show you how to do is to draw a line. And this is useful if there is a road that exists in real life, but is not represented on the map. So the first way of doing this is, again, from a third-party location. And what you're going to do is tap on these three buttons on the very right-hand side, these three dots, excuse me. It'll bring up these options. You can say draw and measure. And then again, I'm going to use the crosshairs to zero in. I'll zoom in here. And you can see it says tap anywhere to add a vertex to the crosshair. So if I tap, I start my line. And then every time I tap my screen, I can make a turn pretty much. And this is a kind of unwieldy way to draw a line. It's challenging. When I'm done, I can go ahead and hit this check mark sign. And you know, this is an option, but I don't necessarily recommend it. I just wanted to show you how to do it if you wanted to. The important part is once you've drawn a line, to tap on it, hit this little, just touch the pop-up that it brings up. And then again, we'll provide the same type of information. So in this case, maybe I'll say that this is a 4x4 road. This style is okay, just that orange line is just fine. And for a description, maybe I'll say only accessible. Maybe if I can spell it. Oh, I'm sorry. In dry weather. I'm sorry that's spelled, but it's fine. And then I'll hit done and I'll say go back. And I can close it, and you can see that that information that we just wrote is saved there, because just a line on a map doesn't help us much if we don't know what it is. So it is really important to add that extra data. And then the final thing I'll show, which I think is a much more efficient way of adding roads to a map, is to again go to these three dots in the bottom right-hand corner. You click on them. Instead of draw and measure, we're going to choose record GPS tracks. So the way to do this is to either walk or drive to the start of the road, and then you can press on this button, record GPS tracks. It pops open this fancy thing. I can say start tracking. And what this is going to do is it's going to take a GPS coordinate of my location every couple of seconds. So if I were walking around, it would be taking my location as I went. And then I can say stop tracking once I reach the end of the road, either by walking or driving. And then you say, yes, stop. And you can see down here, again, it says not on map, but if I were on the map, it would have recorded my tracks. So that's kind of the more efficient way to add a road if it's missing, or a different line if it's missing from the map. So we're just going to do those couple of examples, but you know, in your case, you can add as much data to this map as you would like. And you know, the more detail that is included here, the more can be conveyed to emergency professionals that are coming into your area. But it's of no use if you can't get it back on the map. So this is why Avenza is really great, is that you can export this layer back into GIS, and it takes no time at all to integrate into the base map that we just created before. So to do that, you're going to click on this other button on the right-hand side, which shows a pin and these little lines down here. So if you tap on that, it brings up our layer. And you can see that there's 2 place marks and 2 tracks in that layer. So that's great. So if I want to, I can click on the arrow here and I can see what is included. If I tap on this information, this little I can change the layer name. So I might say this is Katie Smith's data. So if there are multiple volunteers collecting data, it might be important to add a layer title, and then you can see it changes there. But the real value of being in this window is that this bottom right-hand corner, there's this square with a little arrow that leaves the square. That is our export button. We're going to tap it and we're going to tap export to others. And it brings up this window. You really don't have to do anything in this. The default is all great, but you just want to be sure that the format is in KML. If you tap on that, you can see there's a couple other options. This last one, shape file, is also compatible with GIS easily, but you can see it's a pro subscription service. So KML is just fine. That's perfect for what we're doing. So you ensure that's KML. You ensure that in this data area, all features are selected. And then that's all you really need to do. You can come up to this top right corner and hit export. So you'll see it brings up all these places where I could export it. I'm going to go ahead and hit my email, and then I can send this back to our mapping team. And you can see it down here is saved as a KML file in the body of the email. So with that, I will stop sharing. I know I went through that really fast, and there are probably some questions, and I would love to answer them. But I just want to reiterate that there are written instructions of all of those things, especially the Avenza. There's step-by-step instructions of downloading the app, importing the maps into your app, and then doing all those steps to put place marks on the map. And that's really the most important part for volunteers. It is really, really helpful if folks can digitize their data so that the map team can just go in and import it, and it happens much more quickly than if they have to interpret a hard copy map. So
I just want to thank Katie for an awesome job of presenting a whole intensive bunch of information really succinctly. Again, there are written versions of this on the website, and also this recording will be available, this or the other version of this that we do, depending on whichever one comes out a little better. Katie, could you go back to the screen share and just navigate to our website page with this, just so people can see that?
Absolutely. So here we go. I'm sharing again. I'll come in here. So if I just, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, if I just navigate to the FireSafe Mendocino website, this tab here, prepare your neighborhood, the last dropdown is creating emergency response maps. In this page, you'll see these are kind of the step-by-step that I went through in that first slideshow. And then here is the slideshow again, actually, if you would like to see that again. But over here, this guiding document section is really the important area. So intro to Avenza maps, if I click on that, I think this one's super helpful. It goes through exactly what we just went over, and it shows you where you need to click if that was confusing, because I know it's hard when you can't see my cursor on the screen. Additionally, there's information for folks who have used GIS before, and that's the quick overview. And then soon to be, I'm going to be uploading mapping for new GIS users, and that's going to be a really step-by-step process. And then finally, this volunteer training document has information about the type of data that volunteers might collect, and is a little bit more fine-grained than we talked about originally. And then finally, the last thing I'll point out here is if you click on this step 5, it'll expand, and you can click here to view some examples. And these are of the Hopland area emergency response maps that we are working on right now.
Great. And with that, so I need to get back to looking at the chat, but we've got time for some questions. Someone wants your email, Katie.
Oh, happily, I'll put it in the chat.
And I think we're small enough here that we can probably manage. If anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, that is an option as well. We probably don't need to go through the raise hands thing. Any questions out there?
Just to go back. Oh
I
yeah.
have a question in
Mhm.
regards to the mapping program.
Mhm.
I have some experience in CAD, different types of CAD. But this is a pro version. Do you have a cost of this particular program?
Yeah, so the desktop version, it's pretty steep. It runs about, Scott maybe can correct me on this, but I think it runs about $1,400 for a subscription.
Okay.
Yep,
That's
we
not an
will.
annual. Okay.
That
Excuse
is
me?
I think that is an annual actually. The Fire Safe Council is going to have a pro version of this available, and we will have it on a laptop that's either available for people to come in and use, or we can work something out if you're doing a project. So we will have a loaner version for people doing this, so every neighborhood doesn't have to buy their own.
Thank you.
I was just looking at the online version is about 100 a year, but is it as effective as the pro version to make these maps?
Yeah, so that's something that we actually have talked a lot about. You absolutely can add all this data. You can do the very same thing. The thing that I ran into is that the layout is less customizable. With web maps, it's really geared towards making a web app, it's called. So it pushes the map that you create into a separate URL that people can look at online, rather than one of those PDFs that are quick and easy to read. So that's kind of the main drawback. It's also just depending on what you get used to using. I find Pro a little bit easier to use, and if you're making more complex maps, Pro has more features for these maps. The web version does work just fine. It is really that a PDF issue that you run into.
Right, and even for the online version, I believe you would need what's called a creator license. So that's about $500 a year. So it's a little pricier. But again, we will we'll do our best to work with you. The professional basic is $700 a year. So that's an option. But I think we are going to get the professional standard, which is like $2,700. So it is pricey. But again, we'll do our darndest to make it available to people who want these projects, so we can all use that one source.
I have a question, Katie.
Yeah.
So I was watching your whole presentation and I thought it was very informative and everything, but there was a point where I was like, oh my God, I can't follow all this. And I'm wondering, if it comes to the time with our Fire Safe Council, when we come up with some people who want to actually work on this project, you offer any, at the moment, hands-on instruction, or would you be available for that?
Yeah, so absolutely, I'd love to help if I am available. The only caveat to that is I have kind of a limited term here. So I'll be with the Fire Safe Council until the end of July. And I'm sure I could help with this if it's within that term. Outside of that, I might not be able to.
Okay,
Yep.
We'll get on it then.
We
Yeah,
can try to, oh, go ahead. We can try to find somebody, but that's also the reason we're intensively documenting this on the website. So Katie is doing her best to step-by-step all of this. So you'll have both the video to fall back on and written step-by-step directions as well.
Right on. Thank you.
Pretty soon there will be that inexperienced users document that I spoke about, should be up probably by the end of the month or the beginning of next month. And that is really like, you go to this frame and you click on that, and then it's pretty step-by-step.
Beginner mode. Thank you.
Yeah, and that is, GIS is hard. And like I said at the beginning, if you don't have someone who's already familiar with software like this, it requires an immense amount of patience, honestly, because there's always something that goes wrong.
Yeah. And that, so, two steps there. One is, if one is try to find somebody in your group that knows it. So cast a web, and probably somebody in each neighborhood has at least some experience with this. So try to find a volunteer is step one. Step two is we can also help connect you with a professional. We had a gentleman who did the gentleman who did this for Anderson Valley and the Elk Fire districts. We started off with him. He is, I believe, $70 an hour, so a little expensive, but he can create the base maps in probably an hour or two at the most, and then go back to work on them. So, you could also hire out somebody at a non-bank breaking price who's already got the ArcGIS software as another option. Tammy's got her hand up.
Good morning. Thank you, Scott and Katie. So I'm with NCO. I'm actually in Lake County though, and we have an AmeriCorps team coming. A bunch of them are on this call, but I'm just wondering if we could work something out so they could maybe come over one day and do the actual mapping with you in a neighborhood and then get some experience to bring it to Lake County.
That's a pretty good idea. Yeah, I'm sure we could work something out like that. I think that this Felice Creek neighborhood actually does need some data confirmation. So maybe we could organize that.
Okay, I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
My pleasure.
We're getting close to the end. Any other questions out there? You give a few more seconds for anybody to jump in.
Just the interest, the cost is of course coming up as an issue with ArcGIS, because I know it's a professional product. Have you guys looked at QGIS, which is an open source product?
I haven't. I don't think we have as the Fire Safe Council.
Yeah,
Scott.
let me. I'll put a link in the comments here. I mean, that's a good source which has the same capabilities, but it is open source and
ZGIS?
QGIS.
QGIS, excuse me.
Yeah, it's pretty well known as far as an alternative to ArcGIS.
Okay, great. Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay.
Keith, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was curious about the Knox box. What's the, how do we get these, once we create all this, which is great, how do we distribute for each of these individual neighborhoods? Is there something going on for that?
It's yet another step of the project. So that would be your kind of next volunteer effort. It can be, Anderson Valley's got a source that's done them, so we can provide that. They are, depending on how many you get, it can vary from anywhere from 900 to 600-ish bucks. You might be able to find somebody locally that can make them less expensively. It also is a good project to partner with your fire district on for the Hopland process. We are actually going to buy the boxes for them, so there's good examples that people can see locally of how this manifests. And then the fire district's going to do the painting and installation and all the setup work. So, they're eager enough to have them that they're willing to contribute that part. So it's a good project to maybe work with your fire department on. It's quite possible they might be interested in chipping in to actually, get some of the material for the boxes. Also, this is an opportunity for local grants. Anderson Valley Fire Department, after they created the maps, put in a little community foundation grant to buy Knox boxes for all their neighborhoods, and got that. It's a, we are, by the by, just this afternoon, for what it's worth, the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council is about to put out the press release for our own mini grant process. So we are going to have mini grants available to neighborhood fire safe councils in the range of $2,000 to $6,000, with applications happening throughout the month of February. So that'd be another opportunity. It's a relatively, sort of small funding project. So between your fire department and your neighborhood council, scraping that together is the next step. If you do a map project, step one is getting the maps. Step two is getting them out there.
So Scott, on the box itself, is that a standard unit? I mean, could we look at going together and try to get a grant and then order a whole case of these things? I mean, what's the situation on that?
You know, I have not deeply delved into it. I just know it's a Sonoma place that Anderson Valley got theirs from. And since we're only getting a couple of them at this point, we just went with them, but it's quite possible that what you're suggesting could happen. Absolutely.
Great, I'll help with that.
And following up with a Knox box, what kind of an area would a single box serve? You know, here in Trails, there's a lot of roads, it's pretty dense, and it's different out on, say, the third gate. So what's your idea on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a local knowledge-based call. There's a lot of places where it's easier, you know, in the Hopland area, it's super easy. McNabb's got one road in, so right at the base of that road. But you're going to want to, you know, sort of think through where an emergency responder is going to be making those decisions. Is there, you know, a place that leads to a large area that, you know, that they're going to need a map for? If so, that's a great place to do it. But I don't know that there's a sort of easy formula. You just got to look at your layout and decide where it's going to make the most sense to have information available before people plunge down a road that's got a bunch of unknowns.
And for some of those larger areas too, it does pay to make kind of an overview map that shows the roads and the housing density, and then have sub maps, you know, use a grid or something on the overview map, and then have more specific maps that show that fine level of detail that we talked about.
Well, it's almost like a catch-22 kind of thing of there needs to be a map showing where the Knox boxes are so they can find out where the local maps are. So I understand about locating them in an obvious kind of place, but is there some way we could sort of have an Uber map that just like shows the whole county and shows where all these lock boxes would be? Something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we are going to have a master map page on our website. And certainly you could, you know, for you guys are different from a lot of areas. You've got sort of a whole world of your own with a lot of sprawling in and out. So, you know, if you do a main project, maybe one sort of at the base of Sherwood that has a map to all the other boxes, with its own little scan, would be an option. Yep, there are a lot of things to think through with the project. That's for certain. And we are at the end of the hour. So Katie's got her email in there. I will type mine quickly in the box. So it is Director Fire Safe Mendocino. Oops, maybe if I can type. Let me use this other keyboard. You can follow up with questions for either of us. You can also get our contact information off the website. So if you don't have this handy, there are a lot of ways to get in touch with us. And thank you all so much for your attention and for attending this. Thanks for your interest. Greatly appreciated.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Yeah. Feel free to drop a line whenever.
All right. Bye all. Oops, and I misspelled my own email address. No, I didn't. There it is. It's good. All right. Everyone have a great afternoon or morning. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.